Thursday. So after all of the color changes from last week, I thought what we needed this week was something a little bit more chill. So here is a little bear and a big bear because I needed it. For today's video, I am going to be using my usual 8-ply, which will make one approximately this size, as you can see in my hands here. But I would also like it to be known that you use the mega chunky, you get the oh lordy common size. Let's get into tools and materials. So for today's project, you're going to need 8-ply 100% acrylic yarn in just one color. Now this is also known as DK in some places. You're going to need a pair of 9mm safety eyes, your 3.5mm hook, pins and needles, scissors, and some stuffing. But that's it. Now, I did buy the yarn that I used for this boy like pretty close to 15 years ago, but I do have the label, so I don't know if it's still available, but this is what I used if you were trying to make a big one for yourself. That's enough of that. Okay, so as per usual, today's pattern will be sent out to my patrons and will also be available in my Etsy store. I will leave links to both in the description down below for anyone who's interested. So there's only really 3 main patterns for this bear. You've got one leg shape that we make 4 times. You have one ear shape that we make twice. And then we have just this head and body nugget that we make starting at the tip of the nose and working all the way down to the butt. So for today, I'm going to start by making that head and body chunk. Okay, so because this is a chiller pattern today, I might just stop and have a bit of a chat with you guys as well as we make it. There's not really any kind of traps lying in wait anywhere in the instructions. Okay, so we're going to start with a magic ring of 6. So there is our magic ring of 6. Now over the next 5 rows, we're going to be building up the shaping of the head. So you'll note that we are expanding really only on the top and out to the sides a little bit to sort of lean into this almost hexagonal 6-sided shape. So yeah, that'll bring us to where the back of the head sits. Now, it wasn't my original intention to actually make a bear today, but I've actually been working on developing this little grub. And while he is currently cute, don't get me wrong, he's a cute object. He's not quite what I want him to be. So I have another version of him over at my other desk that's still currently in development, and I'm just gonna keep trying to make him what I want him to be rather than release him before he's ready. Okay, that's the end of row 3. Because he is such a small bear, that means that we have to do a lot of shaping in only a couple of stitches, which is where things like single crocheting 3 times into the same stitch, I used to call them increase 3s, that's where they come in really, really handy because they give you a lot of growth and they give you a really clearly defined middle stitch to things as well. The end of row 4. So you can see there straight away, those are where we did those 2 sort of patches of increases, and it's already starting to build up the front of the face there. So that's roughly where those eyes will go in a minute, but we'll add a couple of rows first. So in row 5, we've hit our first set of brackets, and this is just my reminder to you that you finish each set of brackets before you move on to the next instruction. So in this row here, we're starting with 4 repeats of a single crochet and then an increase. So you do all 4 of those, and then you move on to the next instruction in the row, which is just finishing off with 4 single crochet. So they're like mini rows inside the bigger row. If it helps, you can write them out in full as well. We can just sit there with a notepad. So again, in row 5, you'll note that we're loading all of our increases along that top edge because that's where we want our growth, and then we're just single crocheting across the bottom to keep it nice and flat. So at this point, you should have 16 stitches in total around. So we're going to work one more row and then we're going to insert our eyes. So there we go. So at this point you should start seeing the shaping come into effect. Now you can wait until later to insert your eyes, but I like to do it now because first of all, they're going into row 4. So we've already extended a couple of rows past that. So we have the room to insert them. But also at this point in time, we can really easily see, first of all, that we've got these 2 corners here and then we've got these 2 cheek corners. And so it's really easy to tell exactly where the eyes go. As you work up this piece, because we've got the shaping of the shoulders and the shaping of the butt, I did notice that it becomes a little harder to identify where the actual top of the head is versus where the side is. But if we insert them now, you'll always have them there to help you line everything up. So what you're going to do is identify your starting magic ring and count backwards 4 rows. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then lining them up with one of the 2 top corners you have. So those would be the increases we did in the last row. I'm going to insert my eye. So that's between rows 4 and 5. So that's 1. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can of course insert your eyes wherever you would like, but that is just how I'm positioning mine. Again, you don't have to snap your backs on now. You can wait until more of the shape is revealed, but I've done a few of these now, and so I'm happy with that location and I'm going to snap my backs on. There we go. So grabbing our hook again, we're now going to work 2 rows of 20 single crochet around just to finish working up the bulk of the head. Like so. There is his head. Okay, so there we are at the end of row 8. Now, just as a side note, when we sew his ears on later, oh, you're such a good, what a well-behaved little bear. Look at the little gentleman. So when we sew the ears on later, we'll be basically sewing them in line with this row. I just wanted to flag it because it might make it easier for you if you wanted to put a marker here so you can find it more easily later. So if you're comfortable with just attaching those as you go, you can do that if you like. I prefer to sew this little piece on just because I formed it as a magic ring and I think it's easier to stitch with precision than it is to crochet it in line at this point. Okay, and then we're basically just going to work up the next 14 rows of the body. So you'll see as we go there that we'll be shaping some shoulders, a dip in the back, and then the butt. The bear kind of feels like it came out of left field for me as well. Don't you worry about that. Like it was nowhere on my to-do list. I don't know, I picked up my hook and just a bear happened. So while I work up the rest of this piece, I just thought I'd fill you in on some of the plans I have for the next couple of months. Okay, so by the time this video gets uploaded, I will probably have launched the next Not My Idea vote. So for anyone new here, I collect all the requests and ideas from the comments, pick a handful of them out, and then give you guys a chance to vote for what gets made. Of course, my patrons do get the chance to vote in a second chance draw, so you guys get to pick one, and then they get to pick one as well. Anyway, we are picking the design that I'll be making this month, so don't forget to go to my community tab and vote. You can also leave any ideas for future votes in the comments of this or really any of my videos. I do try to read them all. Right, other than the Not My Idea design, I've been working on the script for a sequel to the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Designing video. This time I'll be focusing on a couple of approaches to no-sew designing. So that'll probably be the last video out for June. Oh, and I have my 100th video coming up in July. It's been a 2-year journey to get here, and I've been thinking about a particular idea for a while now. And I think I'm gonna do it for that week. It's a format that I've seen a few creators do, but I've been particularly inspired by NerdForge, and it's the 1 hour versus 10 hour versus 100 hour project. So even Marigold only took like 60 to 80 hours. So the idea of a 100-hour project boggles my mind, but I think it could be really cool and thematically appropriate for the 100th upload on this channel. Other than that, I think I'd like to start streaming more. Y'all are just a really cool group of people and you're a lot of fun to hang out with, so I'm gonna try and make some more time to do that and maybe make it a regular thing. So we'll have to work out time slots and that sort of thing, but like, yeah, I'm gonna try and incorporate that into the schedule a bit more. So here we are at the end of row 21. So he looks like a real funny kind of little slug shape with a cute little wiggle to him. Maybe this was the grub I was designing all along. Anywho, so now we basically just have 3 more rows to work up to close off this opening at the back. So at this point you can stuff it. I would suggest stuffing in small amounts just to make sure that you're really filling out each element of the shape. So in particular, you want to focus on the nose, this curve at the back, which forms the shoulders, and then make sure that you're also stuffing the chest as well. If you just shove large pieces of stuffing in here all at once, you risk losing the shape that we've just worked so hard to build. So keep that in mind. So now we're just going to work the next 3 rows to close off this opening. And with 6 stitches remaining, we're going to finish off. Now you'll notice that you've got this little hole in the back of your bear butt. So what you're going to do is weave that remaining tail through the front loops only of the 6 remaining stitches. And this makes kind of like a reverse magic ring. Like so, and then just give it a little pull to close. So there is your chunky boy. There is the main nugget of your bear. So for now, we're just going to pop that to one side and we're going to start working on his legs. Okay, so grab your brown. Now, as I mentioned at the start, all 4 of his legs are the same pattern. So for each one, we're going to start at the sole of the foot and then work our way up. And finish off. So that is what the little leg looks like. Now you'll note that the front of the leg will be where we did those increases in the second row. You may need to pinch it to make it slightly more pronounced. But if you need help identifying it, you can flatten out the top of your piece so that the finishing off point lines up with one of the edges, and that edge will be the front of your foot. Now we are just going to take a little bit of stuffing and firmly stuff this leg up to about the halfway point, leaving the top half of it free. So then I'm going to flatten out that starting magic ring and give it a pinch to make the toes form again, and flatten out the top so you can see where it's empty. So after you finish making one, you're going to need to make 3 more so that you have 4 in total. So there we go. Now you can move all of your bear legs to one side. So last but not least, we need to make his little ears. Now this piece is so fast, if you blink, you'll miss it. So grabbing your brown, make a magic ring of 6 single crochet. Like so. And then pull to close the loop, but encourage it to not necessarily sit in a circle, but instead to sit as a little arc. Now this makes very little difference to the ear. It's just something that I know I consciously do with it. And then finish off. And that is literally the entire ear. Now you are going to want 2 of them, but they whip up in no time whatsoever. So now that we've made all of our pieces, all we need to do is pin the pieces on and then sew them together. So I'm going to start by pinning on his ears. Now, as I mentioned at the start, the ears go between row 8 and row 9. So find your magic ring and count back 8 rows. 1, 2, 3. You're going to want to line it up diagonally with the middle of the eye and the nose. So if we go straight back in a line, that's approximately where you want your ear to sit. I'm going to chuck a pin in on either side. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. Now I can just count back, or I can just follow that line around until we are roughly at the same angle again. So between the nose and the middle of the eye, out that way. And there are his ears. So next up, we're going to pin his legs in place. Now these legs are all the same, but what I like to do just to stay organized is pick 2 that are going to be on the left-hand side and 2 that are going to be on the right-hand side. So I'm going to start by pinning down, I think this is technically the right-hand side. So once again, you're going to count backwards from the starting magic ring, and we want to count to row 9 this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I'm going to mark that row, and then we want to count to 15. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, skip one row, which would be row 16, and then mark row 17 and row 23. So what you see there is we've marked 2 little sections. Now that is where the top of your leg is going to line up down the body of the bear. So now you just need to work out where vertically the leg should be positioned. And what I like to do, hold my hook up with the underside of the nose, and that is the line where you want the legs to line up. So I'm just moving my pins down now. So that is exactly where I want the legs to go. So this is my front leg. I'm going to line it so the front is facing forward, line the opening up between those 2 pins, and pin in place. Now it is going to like point outwards a little bit from the body at this point. That's fine. I'm going to just pin both of them in place where they go along the body, and then we'll finesse the position in a minute. So that's where those 2 go. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So marking row 9, 15, 17, and 23 again. Once again, using just my hook or a ruler or a pencil to line up with the underside of that nose, moving my pins down so that I know the height that I want the leg to be at. And then just once again, pinning them in place. Now this is just a starting position. If you get all 4 of your legs on and you decide that those legs look funny or that they're not in the right spot, in your opinion, just move them around a little bit. Move them slowly though. So I would start by moving up 1 stitch or down 1 stitch, forward and back. Okay. So there I have all 4 legs loosely positioned. So he's going to be like a real splat bear. We stop there, and you can do that if you want. But instead, what I'm going to do now is just hold the legs against the body and pin them accordingly. So I'm pinning these legs in a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with the back legs. There we go. So now we just need to make sure he can stand up on his own. So moment of truth. He's a little wobbly. I might just gently ease one of these legs down a little bit and repinch the feet. But in general, absolute stability. More stable than I am. So with that all sorted out, what we are going to do now is take our needle and some of our brown, and we're going to sew them together. So I'm going to start with these ears. So I've talked about this a little bit before, but I may as well mention it again now. When sewing your ummies together, never stab your needle through the middle of stitches. Always insert it through the gaps between the stitches, and you'll get a more invisible join between things. So that goes for these ears too. So I'm just inserting through the gaps between the stitches of the ear. And then doing the same thing into the head. So 1 stitch on the edge, 1 stitch through the middle of that magic ring. Mind your tails. Now you can leave a long tail on the end of your pieces and use those to sew on. I drifted away from using that technique, and I think a big part of that is the fact that I really hate threading my needle, and so I'd rather just attach a strand that's long enough to do all of the pieces. But yeah, if that is something that works for you, it can be a bit of a time saver, but if it doesn't work for you, it's just a waste of time. Yeah, so give it a go and see if you like it. Then 1 stitch on the other side of that ear. So those pins should be able to be removed now. Excuse me, Mr. Voltorb. And pop. And this should pass the tug test. So if you give it a little pull, it should be firmly attached. If it's not, go back and add some more stitches. So I'm going to do the same thing to this other ear. There's the other ear also passing the tug test. So now I have these 4 little sort of tentacles flailing around. I'm going to trim them off so that they're maybe just over 1 inch long. And use my hook just to tuck them away inside the body. This might go without saying, but always tuck your tails in the closest opening. You don't want to like thread them across or they'll be visible. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I sew on one of the legs, because I do just want to acknowledge the fact that I'm not super happy with the join that I got on the blue one. I think that it looks very messy. On the Chunky Boy, it's less visible, but I think that's just the nature of the yarn as well. So how I'm going to attempt to get a nicer join on these legs is when I insert my needle through the leg itself, I want to go through, first of all, both layers, but I'm just going to work through the loops. So the loops of both layers, and it's as though I would be inserting my hook to crochet. So that's what I mean by those loops. And then I'm going to insert through the body and across just one stitch. And pull tight. Then I'm going to insert it again. So through those loops, making sure that I pick up both layers of the leg. I'm only working through 3 loops because I'm finding that 4th loop a little too hard to get to. So that's something to be aware of. So out and up, and then again, into the body and over one stitch. And I'm just going to keep doing that the whole way along. So I'm going to pull out the 2 pins from the top corner, but this pin at the front is still in. So that join's it's not too bad. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. So what we're going to do now is remove the pin that's holding it against the body. It should hinge open. I'm going to thread my hook through the body until I'm a couple of rows in from where the leg is joined. I'm going to fold this leg back in. Basically just put a little stitch through the leg that's going to hold it against the body there. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you can see that on camera. And just insert back through the body and out to the side of the leg. So now I'm on this side. I'm thinking I'm just going to put one more extra stitch just there, just to really firmly hold it in place. There we go. So when I give it a wiggle test, I'm checking to make sure that it's fully secured along the top bit and that it's not moving out of position from where I put it. Now, at some point during that process, I have tilted my leg downwards apparently. So I now have a walking bear. And that's okay. I'm just going to sort of make my peace with that. I find that that's kind of half the fun of making amigurumi, is just sort of letting them take the form they want to take as well. So I've got a little stepping bear there. If I'd been paying slightly more attention to the pose instead of the stitching, the legs should line up and he should be standing. I don't think he loses anything for the step. So now I'm basically just going to sew on the other 3 legs. Okay, so I actually think that I got those joins pretty nice this time around. They're still not perfect, but like that's what practice is all about. So now this step is just purely optional, but I'm going to take just a little bit of black yarn or embroidery thread. I've got embroidery thread threaded already, so I'm just going to use that. And I'm just going to stitch over the end of the nose to create a little snoot. And there is your finished bear. Okay, so that's it for today. Don't forget to go over to the community tab and vote in the next Not My Idea poll. I am gonna have to close that down in the next 24 hours or so, just so that I have, Time to actually design the thing. But other than that, I will see you next week. Okay. Bye.